Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. We're continuing with Logosynthesis Day. You are now at the Healing Trauma track, and this is the third part of the Healing Trauma track. Today, we are having Tina Bončina from Slovenia, Dr. Tina Bončina, and Dr. Lori Hobbs from the United States. They're both trauma specialists. They both have extensive experience working with trauma and logosynthesis, and they're both going to share their experience with it. This session is about examples. It's also about your questions. So we're going to co-create it together. Welcome, Lori and Tina.
Hi, hello.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Alan.
You're very welcome. And I'll give the floor to you. All yours.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. Dr. Tina, did you want to say a little bit about yourself so people know more about you?
Yeah, thank you, Lori. I will introduce myself and then give the word to you because you have the introduction, right? So as Alan said, I'm a medical doctor, but I do not really practice medicine. I started my psychotherapy practice 15 years ago and came into contact with logosynthesis about 13 years ago. And I've been using it ever since. My main field of work at the moment is burnout and all the consequences of the epidemics and the recession. I work with children and adolescents as well. And should I say, the usual topics like anxiety, depression, and PTSD. I'm very glad to be here. This is my second time that I participate in the Logosynthesis Day. And I hope you will get some information and get some insight how to work with logosynthesis. Please don't be obedient students. Be curious and make some noise, okay? Over to you, Lori.
Yeah, we'll have more fun that way. Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much for the platform, for Dr. Lammers, for all the hard work that everyone's put into behind the scenes, our third year, and Dr. Tina, and to wonderful Alan, my wonderful friend from Peru. And we met in 2018 in logosynthesis classes, and we've been laughing across the continents ever since. And I'm a licensed psychologist in California and USA, and been doing psychotherapy a long time. Started off like you, Dr. Tina, in child and family work, and did a lot of cognitive behavioral and a little bit of psychodynamic. And because of family with severe health problems, started to look at other alternatives than just medical model and conventional psychotherapy, and stumbled across many modalities, including tapping, chakra work, Reiki, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, so many different modalities. And I came across logosynthesis through ACEP, Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. I'm the past president of that organization now. But one of our presenters was Dr. Lammers, and I wanted to learn more. So in 2018, I took an advanced class he was teaching. That was my first intro to this. And it was on birth trauma or conception trauma. So I kind of started off at a very intense level and fell in love with the model, and became a practitioner and now a trainer. And this is my second year participating in this seminar. So what we'd like to do today is talk a little bit about the application of logosynthesis with trauma specifically. And this is a trauma track. This is a track for therapists and counselors, although I know not everyone here now or that will be seeing the recording later is in that catchment area, but we kind of organized this with that in mind. And so just by a case of review, for those who don't know, there's a difference between traumas that are big, that are catastrophic, like going through war, for example, And then traumas that are kind of more like everyday traumas. And in the field, we talk about this as big T or capital T trauma, or smaller case or little t trauma. And you can have large reactions to both and small reactions to both. But the nature of the trauma generally is seen as big T or little t trauma. And then also you have to see how you personally are responding. So in a little bit of time after we have some discussion, Dr. Tina and I are going to give case examples, and I'm going to give one with little t trauma, and she's going to give one with the big T trauma. So that's kind of like a coming attraction in our little bit of time together. We also want to have some discussion with all of you. So by just talking a little bit, Dr. Tina, I know that we have mind, body, spirit reactions to life, and also to trauma. And in your work, do you find that people tend to get stuck in certain ways when they've had a trauma that's happened to them that interferes with their life? Is that why they might come to you to get some help?
Basically, people, when they come to me, they know nothing apart from their suffering, why they came. They just come with some, let's say, assortment of different symptoms. With trauma, they're usually stuck, low, and they have low energy, and they are, let's say, presenting with anxiety, panic attacks, depression. Most of them with complex trauma are already on medication. And yeah, basically that's it. They don't really come as I have a trauma. Very rarely, very rarely. Usually they present with symptoms.
Okay. And as we know from trauma work, those symptoms can be high arousal, like nightmares and intrusion and reliving experience, and also low arousal, like numbness or depression or shock or avoidance. And so do you find that logosynthesis is helpful in both of those cases?
I find it extremely helpful. I hardly remember how I used to deal with these cases before I had this approach in my hands. Like Suzanne from Blumenthal once said, 90% of the time I use just the basic procedure, okay? And then I resort to other, let's say, approaches from time to time. But it's the whole theory of the frozen energy that I think is very valuable here. What are your experiences? How do you take on these cases? How do they present in your practice?
Yeah, thank you for asking. My practice has changed a lot over the years. And I would say the more I get into energy practices, the more I have people who are very attuned to that field already. So they come oftentimes, they're usually healers themselves or therapists or people who are deep into energy work. So they come with a lot of resources. And so I'm able to kind of play deep into that field with them. And they may already have a lot of self-awareness about trauma. In fact, they may have had many years of trauma therapy themselves, working with other people. But they still have frozen energy or stuck spots. I find that it's easier to work with someone who knows that they are overreactive because they're getting so much intrusion. It's harder to work with someone sometimes with energy work if they're on the other end of the low arousal and they're feeling more detached and more numb. It's not that you can't work that way. It's just that it sometimes takes a little bit more detective work or effort on their part to kind of figure out what is it, because it's not alarming to them. It's more of a detachment or more of a numbing, but it can work in both cases for sure.
That's a very clever observation. It reminds me of my clients that are lawyers or judges or from that field of work, very rational, very analytic. They are not in tune with their energy, and when they come severely burnt out, they usually present with, I just want to know what's going on. And when I'll know, it will be better.
Yeah.
And we all know it doesn't work like that, does it? The logic has very little to do with it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Good point. It's like the head only, and a lot of psychotherapy lives there. The nice thing about logosynthesis is you don't need to live there, and you also don't really need to know the problem, but you do have to be somewhat in touch with your personal space, with your, at least with your beliefs, if not your own physicality. And so, but there's entryways in all sorts of places for people that are more in their heads.
Right. And that, if we talk about the trauma here, working with logosynthesis, the beauty of this approach is that you can, once you attune your client to the existence of the personal space, and once they know how to explore it, it does come naturally. Okay, you just have to give them the chance. But the thing that impressed me the most is that there are not many words needed, right? They can really explore and just see the images and not really talk about them. And that prevents the re-traumatization possibility, which is very, very important. And I think that's the main difference between other modalities, because there are other modalities that go quite deep with trauma, like brain spotting or EMDR. We do have to acknowledge that, but they all include talking about trauma, don't they? And here, there's no such need. So all the things that happen you can visualize them, they can activate you, but you don't have to go, you can peel it off layer by layer. You don't have to re-trauma. There's no, let's say, no danger of re-traumatization.
Right. And then people can bring up whatever is needed in the moment at that level where they are. You meet them where they are. And there isn't that sense of pressure of having to get to something deeper necessarily, because it just rises up. I have the image of making like a stock of soup, with meat, and how, the debris comes up and you like skim it off the top, and then there's more that comes up until it's clearer and you can see through to the bottom. So I'm wondering if there's any questions or reflections from the audience before we dive deeper and maybe go into some case studies.
Yeah, I do actually. Is there a difference between, for instance, EMDR and logosynthesis in terms of, is EMDR indeed only desensitizing, so we're not actually processing it? And the other thing is, EMDR seems sort of, you depend or you trust basically the self-healing process of a person or of the being that is here. And the sentences are actually precisely guiding this healing process, because the words do, of course, describe what is happening. So is it like more intentional in that sense? So you're actually, you're speaking the result, right? And is there a difference between, indeed, this and EMDR in terms of desensitizing and processing as the sentence is described?
Mm-hmm. May I, Laurie?
Please, I'm not trained in EMDR.
Yeah, I will draw you something, right? So that it will make it easier for understand, as far as I can see, where the logosynthesis work, and you tell me if I have answered your question. Okay, Fausto, thank you for your question. Okay, this is a sketch. Okay, so don't judge me by my drawing capabilities, right? So if this is our brain, intersected. The perception of our world is in a place called thalamus. This is all the reference points from our world are here. So this is the definition of the table: a happy place, a sad place, how to behave at the bank, in school, with a lover, with a husband, with a child. Yeah. So this is our frame of reference, like our image of the world. And everything, let's say this is the I, everything we see or perceive or even hear, sense, taste, yeah, goes first to the cortex of our, oh, I went overboard, to the cortex of our brain, and then we go and compare it to the reference points. And then a structure below the thalamus, called hypothalamus, obviously, decides whether this is pleasant, dangerous, or neutral. Okay, pleasant things go into the limbic system, like I feel good. There's serotonin, dopamine, stuff like that, going on, making us feel great, satisfied, happy, yeah, connected. And then there are neutral things which just go into logic and into automation. And then there are dangerous things. These are the things that we deal with in coaching, counseling, and psychotherapy. And here is where logosynthesis works, okay? So if we go, let's change the color. If the hypothalamus decides that this is something dangerous, there are two paths. One is through amygdala, the fast path, and one is through hypophysis, the slow path, okay? And EMDR just works here, so that the reaction from the body, yeah, either the slow or the fast lane, is desensitized. So here I would say that EMDR works. So you get lower reaction and it gives you more objectivity in deciding what to do. So you are more capable of doing certain things. And logosynthesis works here. You check, because through here, it changes the whole perception in the brain. So that's why this is desensitizing. We have slower or lower or no reactions from the body. And here we process it differently. And that's the main thing. Because while you're young, you're filling in this library of memories and you make lots of mistakes because you're a child. Everything seems dangerous to a child. Or when there's something traumatic happening and you're in a very excited state, you perceive much more things as dangerous or lethal even, right? And you put them, you store them as potentially deadly, right? So while doing the work with logosynthesis, these images, they change, right? And this is the beauty of it. Yeah, because you work on a subconscious level. That's why during the sentences, when there's a pause, we call it processing, right? This is what happens, right? Yeah, logosynthesis work. Not in the hypothalamus. All the neurologists will give me a hard time if we say that, but on that level, from the thalamus and hypothalamus, this is the subconscious level, yeah, the deep brain tissue. And EMDR is mostly on lower level, on the reactions of the body, okay? Let's not go too medically, but this is the difference. And that's why here you cannot re-traumatize and here actually you can, okay? Does it make sense to you?
Yes, thank you.
Sharing.
Yeah.
And
What a lovely explanation. Thank you.
thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
I
very
make
good.
one comment from a totally different level.
Please do, Philip.
With EMDR at the same time, the client is dependent on the therapist to do the procedure, to guide them. Logosynthesis, one of the things I love about it is that in saying the sentences, not everyone really integrates this, but in saying the sentences, you are declaring that you have the power to shift your own energy. And the more you use it, the more you integrate that sense of your own power to move your own energy. And compared to a procedure like EMDR, where you always have to go to someone to have them guide the procedure. And that's, I find that hugely empowering, but also it transcends psychology and it transcends therapy.
Oh, just such a lovely explanation. Thank you for pointing that out. It's sometimes so obvious to me that I forget to mention it. Yeah, but it is so important. Yeah, it does empower you. And that's why we have self-coaching seminars as well. And that's why Willem always says, I don't need meditation, because once I clear my space with logosynthesis, I don't need that extra time. Yeah, so brilliant. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
If I can add onto that as well, and I still want to be aware of the time, and I want to make sure we get to the cases, because we could probably talk about this model the whole day. But one extra plug is about essence, and this is going to become a little bit more important with cases. So there is a thought that in logosynthesis that there is the life force energy that we're all born with. And you don't have to believe in God or chi or prana, but we do know that we are more than just a meat suit, that we live. And so life force energy infuses us. And when we have trauma, we get stuck from that flow. And when you replace that flow, you're back into your original, most optimal functioning. And that's an idea that therapists like, but oftentimes the models don't support talking about it deliberately or having a mechanism for it. It's almost like a byproduct that happens with post-traumatic growth and other things that can happen, like with meditation or spiritual practice. But it's really at the heart of logosynthesis, and it's embedded in the sentences sort of indirectly. And so I find from my personal experience that what I love so much about logosynthesis is that this essence is infused in the whole system. It allowed me naturally to jump straight into the heart of essence and to not have to worry about how is this going to happen? Is it going to be okay? And all of that. I already had a sense of flow within myself that I was disconnected from. And when I say the sentences, boom, I'm right in the middle of it. So I wouldn't say that you don't need meditation. I would say it is a meditation. It is a spiritual practice. It doesn't have to be, but it's there and available. And I think that that enhances the grace, the beauty, and the how quickly things can be resolved with this method. So that's from my heart, from my spirit, speaking about this. So I want to take a pause here and know if it's time to move on to our cases.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So events happen which cause disruption, and it's normal. And some people bounce back, but not all. So I'm going to go through this quickly. We already talked about these things, about trauma symptoms, little and big trauma, and we're going to get to the cases. Okay. Everything is energy. We know this. We don't have to retell the story. And so here we go. Here's the case that I have. It's called History Repeats Itself. So in this case, and this is a compilation of fantasy and various cases that I've had over the years, so it's not any one person. There was parental arguments. We know that parental arguments can be stressful for children when you're growing up, and that oftentimes people feel forced to choose a side. And in doing this, nobody wins. Everybody's a loser. Oftentimes, the child will feel responsible for the arguing adults, and it makes them sort of stretch into adulthood before their time. And we call this a parentified child, a child who's acting like the parent, to say, stop fighting, or, you know, they kind of take on the role as an adult. And this can have repercussions later on in life, as well as in the moment. So now also we know that sometimes adult conflict in the now, when we're grown up, can be similar to memories from the past during childhood, and that these frozen energy patterns can repeat until they are unfrozen or freed. So this is kind of the context for the case that I'm going to be sharing. And so I'd like to introduce you to Pat. Pat is our generic client who comes into therapy, and the case is called History Repeats Itself. And the invitation is that Pat rewrites the past. So Pat came to me wanting career advice. Pat had heard about logosynthesis and had read a book and wanted to learn more. And Pat told me from the beginning that they had been in psychotherapy for a long time, working with family issues for many years, and that they felt they had resolved their family issues to a point that allowed them a lot of freedom in living, but that they were getting stuck with career. And so our focus was only on career advice. And specifically what happened in this session is that Pat had witnessed an argument between coworkers. And Pat noticed that this led to Pat having a stomach ache. And so not even being part of the argument, but just witnessing it, the stomach ache appeared. And Pat wanted to have some help with this problem, this symptom. As we started to talk a little bit more about what happened, Pat started to recollect, oh, this reminds me of when I was young, when my parents would argue at night. And Pat described being alone in their bed at night, the parents thought Pat was asleep, and Pat would hear the parents arguing and would start to get so upset, and it was hard to fall asleep. And then in the morning, Pat would be tired and Pat's stomach would be bothered, and it was hard to eat breakfast the next morning. And this often happens with trauma, where the anxiety causes the body to not be in flow, and the person clenches and has difficulty breathing, sleeping, and sometimes eating. But Pat said, this is from the past. It's buried in the past. I don't need to look at it anymore. I really want to work only on current conflict with this coworkers at work. And because I've worked on my family past already. And I said, well, that is true, and you have, but in all of your years of working, did you ever try to work on the level of energy? The idea that the parental arguing was a frozen energy structure, and have you tried to have that be in flow? And Pat said, no, they had not, but they were willing to try. And so this is where we launch into the logosynthesis procedure, which we don't have time to go into all of the steps. But one of the things that you do is center in on where is the energy being held? Where is the distress in your personal space in the moment? And Pat was practiced with this approach and was able to identify what appeared to be a red walnut-sized hole in the abdomen in Pat's personal space. And so this is where we engaged with the logosynthesis procedure. Pat said that out of a scale from 0 to 10, that the level of distress was an 8. So 80% distress was quite significant and plenty for us to work with. And so we applied these so-called logosynthesis sentences for this image or the statement of a red walnut and all that it represents for Pat. And Pat was able to work quite successfully with this sentences, but when the sentences concluded, Pat became anxious. And I said, what's going on? And Pat said, I'm afraid that I'm going to let go of everything, including the memories. And I don't want to do that. And I said, absolutely, you should not be letting go of your memories. All we're doing is moving the frozen energy so that you can be more in flow and more in your essence. You will hold the memories still. These are your memories, and they are not going to be taken from you or erased. And Pat became visibly more calm and then was able to continue allowing the transformation process to happen. We checked in at the end of this process, and Pat said that the level of distress had gone down to a 3 or a 4, so more than half, 50%. And in fact, the image of the red walnut had shrunk by half. And then Pat came up with a spontaneous statement, which often happens when you are back in flow. And this was thinking about the coworkers. And Pat said, it's up to them, not me. So Pat realized that it was not Pat's responsibility to help resolve this conflict with the coworkers, similar to what we hope for with children, that they understand that it's not their responsibility to solve their parents' conflict.
Perhaps you could just share the 3 slides. They're is that okay with you?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And are you able to talk then? Yes.
Yes, I am. It's okay.
Very
Thank
good.
you. Yeah. So as you saw, Dr. Laurie presented the case that is, I think, so representative of the effect that logosynthesis has, going from the metaphor of the whole state, using the approach, and after applying logosynthesis, the sentences did the work. The woman had lower stress levels and responded from an adult place, from the here and now. This is what we are searching for, basically, and this was such a great example of this. My case is very similar, only that the problems are layered, right? So it is a big trauma because the client came with lots of issues. She came because she had such big panic attacks that no medication helped. She was in general anxiety state. So she was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder with depressive episodes. She's married, she wants to have children, but not in such a state, because she said, I will not be a responsible parent because I will deal with myself more than with children. She's a postdoc candidate and lives abroad, not in Slovenia. But she chose me. Can you move to the next slide, please, Laurie? Thank you. She chose me because she wanted the therapy in her own language, not having to deal with the language barrier additionally. So once we started working, as usually I always take care of the clients in such a manner that the symptoms are, let's say, almost non-existent, so that they have enough energy to work on themselves and on their better future, right? I really take care of this, that they do all the work in the function of a better future. It's not just about digging up the past, okay? It's not just releasing all that there is frozen. Always in such cases, in the function of a better life, more satisfied life, more energy available to lead the daily life, right? And in the case history, it did emerge very early on that the problem is multi-layered, because she did confess, she shared with me, let's say, not confess, we're not in church, in the 3rd session or in the 4th session, that her brother was very aggressive and that he sexually abused her when she was around 11 years old. Because she did not remember specifically, the age was not very specified. But in logosynthesis, this doesn't really matter. We don't need very specific information in order to release the energy. When she talked about her family, she explained that her father has a schizoid disorder, and when he was in treatment, because he was so hard to live with, he was a bit over medicated, because her mother insisted that this was such that this was the case, because otherwise she couldn't handle him and 2 children as well. So basically, as the client described, he was lying there on that couch like a vegetable, drooling, right? You could talk to him, but he was highly unmotivated, just, let's say, dwelling there, okay? Mother was devoted to caring for her husband, but she gave up on her personal life. She took care of the household, she took care of the kids, but mostly in physical manner, not emotionally. Can you just move one slide, please? Thank you. So because the lady was, let's say, in such a aroused state, because she was losing energy to the panic attacks and anxiety all the time, I really went gently, layer by layer, yeah, so that no re-traumatization had occurred, right? So first we worked on the physical symptoms, and then through the cognitive biases, like I'm no good, I cannot cooperate, it will never be better, I'm not worthy of a meaningful relationship, everybody is better than me. The imposter syndrome was really, really, let's say, a tough nut to break here. But slowly, all of these painful memories emerged. And after about, I think, 6 or 7 sessions, I taught her how to do the sentences on the metaphor. So when she felt a knot in her throat or a hole in her chest, I would instruct her to do the sentences. That way, she basically didn't need the tranquilizers anymore, because they're highly addictive, and that was also a goal because of her wish to become pregnant. That was also quite important. So what do I want to let's say, exclaim here? That when we chipped off one part of her issues, yeah, the symptoms got worse. But she did have a tool, and that was the sentences to use at home. And then she diminished the whole reactions with this. And then she came with another thing. And again, when we opened up a new theme, that the symptoms got worse. So it went really in waves, but slowly and surely she was getting better. The subjects that we worked on were, of course, the father that was ill and all the fantasies that she would become the same. Then her mother and the non-existent care, she was not there. She sensed that there's something wrong, that the brother is not treating his sister correctly, but did nothing. And then, of course, the trauma of sexual abuse that was, let's say, a whole issue on its own. Yeah. So we went through the sensations, through the symptoms, through the cognitive level, the beliefs, the irrational beliefs, the syndromes, to the triggers themselves. And slowly but surely, she managed to get rid of everything. Yeah. But this was not the end. As I started at the beginning of the case report, it's all about the good future, isn't it? So the goal was how to be connected to her husband, to be well in a group of people, to be a team player, and to prepare herself to be a good mother, to allow the child to attach to her, because she had this avoidant style of attachment because of all the things that happened to her. And she got there, okay? She was really, once she saw that things are moving, she was really motivated, yeah? Even though it was hard for her, but on a regular basis, every fortnight we saw each other, minus the 3 months during the summer, because our schedules were different. But she got there, I think I counted 18 sessions. I think that is a very brave woman, but it shows you that the process doesn't have to take years and years and years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you apply the energy aspect of it, the client, and if you teach the client how to take matters in their own hands, it gets better rather quickly. So yeah, basically
beautiful.
that. Yeah,
A lot of intense work to be describing this in just a few precious moments, but
I know. I hope you can make some sense of it, but I didn't want to go into too much details because you don't really need them. I just wanted to show you that even the toughest cases can be resolved if you look at the person holistically. So there's the body, the mind, and the energy, the soul.
Thank you. And I know, Alan, we need to move along. Do we have just a minute to talk about our post-conference workshops?
Yes, right away.
Thank you. So I'm going to be offering next Wednesday a workshop for 2 hours. You can contact me for more information, and it's on the Logosynthesis website. It's called Embodied Intuition and Logosynthesis, and we'll be working on body-based triggers using intuition awareness and looking at physical and subtle communication. And Dr. Tina, you have a workshop as well.
Yeah, I have a workshop mainly for the let's say bodily symptoms, how to treat long COVID, burnout, and psychosomatic disorders on February the 3rd. So I have, because of my medical knowledge, I have somewhat other approach. So I thought that it perhaps will be interesting to some of you. I will post my email in the chat so you can apply there.
Here we go.
Thank you so much for being such a good audience, and thank you, Lori, for it was great working with you.
Yeah,